The New Orleans Saints added an intriguing cornerback in Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round of this year's draft. But does that mean Marshon Lattimore's future with the Saints is in question? We'll talk about it right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvogel, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers and Crystals. So the Saints made an interesting move on Friday night. They traded up from 45 to 41. They end up getting Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama, which is the best name in the draft. It'd be hard to find something better than that name right there. And he's a very intriguing prospect. This is a guy that was expected to go in the first round. A lot of people had him in the top 25, top 30 for grade. So in terms of value, great value for the Saints. And there's a lot of like about Kool-Aid McKinstry, the player. I think this is a guy who is a really good press man corner, very physical, instinctive. You just put on the tape, you're seeing a smart player. This is a guy who was a 3-year starter at Alabama. If anyone got to hear how Nick Saban talked about him on the broadcast, he could not say enough good things about him. And he thinks he's the cornerback in this draft class that is the most ready to play right now. And you might say, of course, Nick Saban's going to say that about his own player. Nick Saban had 2 top cornerbacks in this draft. He said Kool-Aid's the one that's more ready. So that's definitely intriguing to hear. And another aspect of him that I think is a little underrated, he's a good return man. And I think if Kool-Aid McKinstry can start being a little bit of your return man at times, maybe that's some pressure off of Rashid Shaheed. You focus more on the receiver part about it. So player-wise, I think the Saints got a guy who is going to make an impact this year. The question is, who does it come at the expense of? That is what we have to start asking, because I think if you're going to ask just a strict, is he a good player? Is he a good prospect? I think the answer is a resounding yes. I really like him, and I think I'd advise all you guys, if you want to watch the way he plays at the collegiate level, it's intriguing. But I see him as an outside cornerback, and I know today, speaking to the Saints media, he said he'd be willing to play in the slot if he has to. If you just go look at the numbers, he had six snaps in the slot last year. The year before that, 16. So he only has 22 reps in the slot over the last 2 years. And if we're going to get on the Saints for moving a left tackle to offensive guard, or take Ruiz, who was a center, and move him to offensive guard in the NFL, I think that they got to stop moving around these secondary players if they're not comfortable. Reason being, Alontae Taylor good on the outside, not so much on the inside last season. So I think for him, he looks like an outside corner to me. Obviously, the Saints can mold him into whatever they may like, especially because Dennis Allen, if there's one thing I give him credit for, and you know I don't give Dennis Allen credit for anything, but I'm going to give him credit for this one thing. He coaches DBs incredibly well. So I'm interested to see what this means for Kool-Aid McKinstry and his role in the secondary. But obviously, the real question when a pick like this gets made is, what does it mean for the veterans on this roster? And in particular, what does it mean for Marshon Lattimore? So before I get into it, guys, I just want to remind you, if you are listening in the live chat, you can drop your questions, your comments, your predictions, whatever you're thinking about the Saints, good or bad, you could drop them in and I'll pull them up in just a little bit. And also, if you haven't, make sure to smash the like button for us. It definitely helps out the channel, and subscribe to Boot Crew Media. So with Kool-Aid on board, you can't really drink the Kool-Aid without asking, who does he replace? And I think the first guy you're going to point to is Marshon Lattimore. And this would be, you talk about tough shoes to fill. Is there any tougher than Marshon's? Because Marshon came in 2017, Defensive Rookie of the Year, absolute dog, changed the culture. And I'm going to be honest, I consider myself like a younger Saints fan, right? I'm age-wise, still relatively young. Marshon is by far the best cornerback I've ever seen for the Saints, but I went through, especially as a fan who I'm not subjected to decades of Saints football. It's just about 2. I've seen a lot of bad cornerback play. Like growing up, Jabari Greer was awesome. I love Jabari Greer. Keenan Lewis had one good year. Delvin Breaux had one good year. Outside of that, like I'm remembering Brandon Browner being terrible. I'm remembering Corey White. I'm remembering Devontae Harris. I'm remembering the Saints bringing in a bunch of guys that don't work, where I'd get annoyed if Sterling Moore was inactive. Like that's who I would depend my happiness on a Sunday on, whether or not Sterling Moore would play. So Lattimore came in, and not only was he great, he stabilized a position group that the Saints did not have, stable at all for years. And if he is who he replaces, man, those are tough shoes to fill. But I think this might be where we're heading, and I think there's a couple of reasons why. So let's start off with the big thing here, which is the contract situation. I didn't think the Saints were going to trade Marshon Lattimore either before or during the draft because it did not make sense financially. Marshon Lattimore's contract, with the way that it is set up, is for them to move him after June 1st. Because if they were to move him right now, the Saints would take on a ridiculous $30 million in dead money. That's a lot at this moment, especially for a team that does not have a lot of talent on the roster, in my opinion. I think this is a Saints team that is currently, let's just say, trying to find themselves. You would take $30 million in dead money dead on. I think that's crazy. If you trade him after June 1st, that's where it gets interesting because you can split up that dead money. You can have, I believe, if I get the math right, $10.6 million this year and the remaining in 2025. Does that sound attractive? Maybe not that attractive, but for the Saints, it might make a little bit more financial sense if you trade him after June 1st. Also, if you trade Marshon Lattimore after June 1st, there may be a team that missed out on a top cornerback in this draft. They might be desperate. There may be a team that unfortunately suffers an injury in camp. They can be desperate. There might be a team that when you get to training camp, you realize, and we might be a piece away in the secondary from winning a Super Bowl. You might be desperate. So you can get a 2025 asset for the Saints, which I can argue would be a better thing for them because we don't know what they are right now. And there's a very good chance the Saints are not a contending team next year. And there's a good chance that they need as many assets as possible because you could have a new coach who may want to have more picks and more assets to build a football team under his image. So getting that pick for Marshon Lattimore would definitely help. Again, it hurts the immediate future because I think Marshon's the best player they have on their roster. Like, if you just tell me talent, not whether or not they're available, Marshon's the best guy in the roster. That said, availability is an important ability. And the reality is for Marshon Lattimore, he's missed a lot of time. And some of it's a fluke thing. For example, him missing time in 2022 with the lacerated kidney, the guy went to go make up for another DB not playing in their area. And his ability to go down the field and cover with that range was incredible. But he got hurt on the play, and he misses a lot of time. And that's just shit luck, in my opinion. But unfortunately, it happened. And Dennis Allen's mentioned his inability to stay on the field. Mickey Loomis has mentioned it at times. And I think when the Saints are asked about Marshon, they give a lot of what I like to call politically correct answers. For example, this week they were asked about Marshon. They pretty much said they weren't going to trade him. He's on the roster, and then said we should take that back. We don't want to be so definitive. I just think this is a guy that they're willing to trade. And I'm not saying that it is the right thing, but I think the more questionable decision for the Saints would be to get Kool-Aid McKinstry and not know if he's going to play this year. Because I don't think the Saints are a good enough football team to take a guy at pick 41 who you traded up to get, which means you like him and you think there's value and there's a vision. I don't think you trade up for that guy when you're lacking talent and don't play him this year. The Saints are not the team that can afford to do that. The Kansas City Chiefs can, because they got Patrick Mahomes. They have Andy Reid. They have a really talented roster. They can afford to take a guy and say, you might not play this year. If you do, great. If not, we'll worry about it next year. Saints can't be redshirting, folks. So I think when you make a move like this, there is a secondary move coming, though. Is it Lattimore getting traded, or is it Paulson Adebo not getting extended after this year? Because I know the focus is on Lattimore because he's the big name. It's Marshon freaking Lattimore. But Paulson Adebo is going to be a free agent after next season. And as good as Adebo was in 2023, career high 4 interceptions, 70-plus tackles, he looked great at times. Truly great. I think outside of the Rams game, there weren't really times where I watched Paulson Adebo struggle. He looked like a different player. If he plays great, the Saints can extend him. Like, you would feel confident now about back-to-back years of great football. If not, though, okay, maybe you have the replacement in Kool-Aid McKinstry. That is possible. And then the third option, which I don't know how feasible this is, and this might be the worst scenario, would be if you have given up completely on Alontae Taylor and you want to try Kool-Aid McKinstry in the slot. Talent-wise, great, but then you would be saying you wasted a 2022 second-round pick. Wouldn't love to hear that. So there are a bunch of options, and I think that you can argue that taking Kool-Aid gives you insurance. But the Saints aren't good enough to have insurance. They need guys to play right now. They can't worry about the future. So I think Kool-Aid being in the picture means someone's about to get knocked off the frame, and that could be Marshon Lattimore. And I'm not saying it's a definite. I'm just saying remember his contract, the way it is set up with it being post-June 1st, being able to split that dead money around. I think that is a spot where you will see them consider a move. And again, things could change. Situations like this are fluid. But that is why I feel like something's got to be coming. And I just talked about this with a good friend moments ago before I hopped on. The Saints could have used a guy who is an impact player at a different position, maybe wide receiver, maybe offensive tackle, maybe D-line. And I thought what was so fascinating about the start of the second round is there was a run on wide receivers to start. Remember, Keon Coleman at 33, Ladd McConkey at 34. And then there was a run at defensive tackles. Johnny Newton coming off the board, a couple other greats coming off the board. So the Saints saw a run coming. And the fact that they moved from 45 to 41 tells you they were more than willing to trade. But they didn't do it for defensive tackle. They didn't do it for offensive tackle. They didn't do it for wide receiver. So when there were runs at those three positions where the Saints have immediate needs at, they didn't move up, but they moved up to get a cornerback. They didn't move up to get a cornerback and not play him this year. He's going to play. They can't afford to take a second round pick and not play him. Who is it? I tend to believe that it's Marshon Lattimore. But we'll see. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. Because if you trade Lattimore, you better hope you get a decent pick back. Second, third round pick, I think that's what you're probably looking at. And that would be pretty good for New Orleans. So when I come back, guys, I'm going to get into remaining needs for the Saints and also going to get into any comments that you have. Before I do that, though, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, Crystal.
I need to clear something up about New Orleans. While our culinary scene might be on fire, our food has never been about heat. It's always been about flavor. And this is how New Orleans does flavor. Are we clear? Crystal, how New Orleans does flavor.
Once again, thank you to Crystal for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. So I said I was actually going to do remaining needs. Let's get into your comments first instead. So we're going to switch over and get into any comments you guys have. Then we'll go remaining needs, and then we'll bring it back to comments if you guys want. And as always, like I said before, if you're listening and you haven't yet, make sure to smash the like button. We greatly appreciate it here at Buku Media. So we'll start off. Got Robert saying, let's go. We got Rachel saying, I love his name. I mean, how can you not? And also, shout out to the Saints social media team. The minute the pick got announced, they put out a Kool-Aid GIF. I said it before. When he starts making plays, we might have to start screaming that, oh, yeah, in the Kool-Aid voice. I don't know if I'll do it again. I did it earlier today in a little short video we had. Maybe I'll save it for later, but definitely an interesting pick. Lala says, I love this pick, but what does it mean? Obviously, that's going to be the big question. And it's going to linger because I don't think, and I could be wrong, unless the Saints want to just trade him for day 3 picks, and man, would that be depressing. I think that the Marshon thing would linger a little bit longer to figure out what really transpires here. Nola Gang Podcast says, still confused about it, but I'm happy. Nick says, thoughts on trading the other fifths to move into late 3rd/4th. Also, could a Lattimore trade get us a pick this year? More likely next year. It could get them a pick this year. That's if they wanted to trade him right now. Like I said, I just think financially it makes more sense for the Saints to wait to move him. But if they want to move him right now, yeah, they could. But I'm under the assumption that they'll move him after the draft, get a 2025 pick for him. I just think that makes the most sense for this team. Get a feel for what you are this year. You'll have a better feel for what you need going into 2025. I think that makes a lot more sense for them. As for those fifths, so you mentioned it. Saints moved some of their assets. They got rid of a 5th-round pick and a 6th-round pick to go up and get Kool-Aid. You still got 2 5th-round picks, I believe, or it might be 3 more. I think it's 3 more 5th-round picks, excuse me. You got 1 more 6th and 1 more 7th. I would be shocked if the Saints just sit on their hands all day and wait for those picks to happen. It's not in their MO. The Saints like to move up. And I think what the Saints are going to do is they're going to look at this board right now, see how it shapes up, and then evaluate cost. There might be a guy right at the end of this 3rd round that they might want to trade up for. There might be a guy at the top of the 4th round they might want to trade up. And I advise you to remember, last year, the Saints traded up for Nick Saldiveri and they traded up for Jake Haener. Those are guys in the 4th round that they wanted. Neither one played, but they wanted them. And I think the Saints are probably going to be in that method because remember, you're going to have all of tonight. After this draft ends, you're going to have all of tonight to think about guys that you're targeting, anticipating where the movements might be position-wise, and then striking. So I would say around noon, 1 o'clock, that's when the Saints are going to be active tomorrow because I would expect them to make at least one move. Margaret says, I think they may get rid of Alontae Taylor. It's possible. My guess is no, and it's a stupid reasoning, but I think players have an idea what the team thinks about them and their role going into next year. And Alontae was pretty pumped up about this pick. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a stupid way to look at it, but I think Alontae might be safe for at least 1 more. You know, that's just the way I feel about it. Rachel says maybe a Debo. It's possible. I think a Debo, it's based on how he plays this year, and I think this is how I see Paulson. Good rookie year, horrible second year, but was injured. Great third year. So right now, if you had to extend him, I think you could. I think you can make the argument, but the Saints also have the flexibility now to wait if that's what they want, and we shall see. But I think that if I had to bet, it's probably Lattimore, but I don't feel comfortable betting on it yet. I like the Taylor idea, but the trade value isn't as much. Yeah, the trade value for him, I mean, think about it. Teams are going to be wondering, you drafted a guy in the second round, he just finished 2 years, and you're ready to get rid of him. Probably not much. Hurricane Mike says, we got Kool-Aid. I've only watched 7 years of same football. Hey, that's 7 years still pretty good. Probably watched a lot of good years, and now we're kind of getting into that mid-year crisis for them. Smooth Hoops mentions Eli Apple when I was talking about the bad corners. Ryan says, I was shocked Kool-Aid was still there. The fact that they traded up to get him. Also, DeJean was there. DeJean was there, sorry. Was going to be the Packers' choice. He got picked ahead, and they probably is probably why they traded out so fast. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I saw a lot of people saying that Cooper DeJean was going to be the guy for the Packers. That was kind of talked about before the draft even started today. So that does make sense why they were eager to move out of there, and good pick for Philly, obviously, to add another DB to their room. Next up, we got Gatson, Super Bowl bound. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Literally and figuratively. I mean, look, this is still an exciting pick. Like, I don't want people to feel like because this could mean other things, we shouldn't be excited about Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think this is a really good football player. And I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is the type of guy that you draft and you just don't really worry about. Like, you think he'll figure it out. Now, again, you trade Lattimore, there's the pressure of you're replacing Marshon. And I wouldn't want that pressure. That's a lot of pressure. But I think fans should still be excited about the pick. You can have questions, right? How are we going to fill all these other positions needs? Those are fair, but I'd be excited about the player. Logan says, excited about all the Saints news, historical second-day DB I've worked out, and Kool-Aid is a first-day talent. Yeah, and you mentioned it. The Saints are usually at their best in day 2 for DBs. Von Bell, Marcus Williams, Alante Taylor, Paulson Adebo. Like, you can just go through it. That is where they usually make their killing. It doesn't mean it always works out, but the track record and the hit rate for them taking DBs in that round is genuinely pretty good. So I like that. I think it's a good thing for them to attack it again. Rachel says, I give them an A so far in the draft. I mean, that's a pretty good / generous grade. I love the Fuaga pick. I can't say it enough. I'll continue to say it. I like the Kool-Aid pick. I don't love adding another cornerback now. And then because you add Kool-Aid, you do get rid of Lattimore, and there are other positions. But if I'm just going strictly player and value, I do think an A is a really fair grade. Because I think Fuaga was a top 10, top 12 guy. They got him at 14. And I think Kool-Aid was a top 25 guy. They got him at 41. So value-wise, I think they've done a great job. Rachel says, we need a wide receiver, though. Is MT even going to be in the league this year? LOL. I think he will, but I think this might be his last shot. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think that is possible. As for needing a receiver, they do. You're going to have to look around. We saw a lot of guys who I like come off the board. You know, Malachi Corley comes off the board. What was it? Polk early in the first round, first in the second round comes off the board. A.D. Mitchell comes off the board. Ladd McConkey. So there has been a lot of talent coming off the board. And that makes sense. That's usually how it goes. But they're still out there for receiver. I think if the Saints wanted to, and I'm just pulling it up now real quick, you still got Jalen McMillan. You still got Troy Franklin. You got Brendan Rice, who's the son of Jerry Rice. You got Javon Baker. And then you got some other guys later on if you want to take a flyer on. Luke McCaffrey from Rice is an interesting one, younger brother of CMC. That's maybe a player. Roman Wilson just got drafted, so if you guys were interested in him, I would take him off your board if I were you guys. Jaquan Jackson. So there's going to be options. It's really going to be a preference thing. And then obviously if the Saints want, they could dip into the tight end pool, maybe like a Theo Johnson from Penn State later on, but we'll see. Again, it all comes down to whether or not they believe they need a pass catcher. They might decide, guys, to say, we'll push off pass catcher, sign a vet like a Hunter Renfrow, and then figure out pass catcher again next year. It's totally possible. Waste of a pick, especially giving up assets for a position of no need. I mean, is it a waste of a pick? Absolutely not. Can I understand the frustration? Yeah, I totally get why Saints fans would be frustrated, right? Because even if you take him and you say that it is going to be a position needed because you got rid of someone, there is the addition subtraction part to it that you got to kind of factor into it. So I totally get the frustration, but I don't think I wouldn't see this as a waste of a pick. I think that would be kind of disrespectful to the player. Jerry G says, I love the Kool-Aid pick. Laddie staying. We shall see. Wallace says facts because he was definitely on the Packers' radar. Ted says, Lattimore getting traded, second round pick next year. I mean, that would be a good thing for the Saints. And I know that Saints fans don't want to get rid of Lattimore. I love Marshon Lattimore. But if the Saints got a second round pick in the 2025 draft for Marshon, I think you take it because you would go into next year's draft having 2 second rounders and your own first round pick. And either you're going to have a surprisingly good year with draft assets to build off that, or you're going to have a new coach with draft assets to really help out fix that next version of the Saints. So I think that would be a good thing for the team. Maybe Kool-Aid can give Smoke Monday a sip. I forgot about it. Smoke Monday is a pretty cool name, man. But let's not compare the two. Smoke Monday and Kool-Aid, two completely different players, obviously. Gat says, thought we were taking A.D. Mitchell, though agree we still need a wide receiver. Yeah, I thought so. I thought so personally, that was a guy that'd be on their radar. A.D. Mitchell, Keon Coleman. Keon goes 33, so that's a lost cause, obviously. And then A.D. Mitchell went after the Saints pick, so clearly they didn't like him as much as we may have thought they wanted him. Pablo says, I really do hope they get the defensive line some help. I agree. You know, I think the defensive line of all the position groups on the Saints, maybe outside of offensive line, but Fuaga definitely helps the equation. They're all question marks. Carl Granderson's a good player. Outside of Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan could be washed. Peyton Turner never plays. Isaiah Foskey, we have no idea what he's capable of, and that's either good or bad. And then Chase Young, neck surgery. So a lot of question marks. Logan says, is there any late round quarterbacks you like? Are the Saints connected to any of them? Connected? I mean, obviously the Saints have been linked to Pratt multiple times, and that could just be the close hometown type of thing. Me personally, I don't see it. Last year, I actually really liked Jake Haener, and I actually predicted that the Saints should draft him, and they ended up doing that. And I think the Saints just want to go into this year with Carr as their starter, Haener as the backup. Maybe I'm wrong, but that kind of feels like the vibe that I'm getting out of New Orleans. So I don't really see a late round quarterback. If the Saints want to just add one just for the sake of it, you guys know my thought process. I think you could add one every year and hope to God that you get lucky. So fine, but there's none to me right now that I think that the Saints got to run to the podium and go get. That's just me personally. This was a very good quarterback class, particularly first round. And then after that, it is what it is. Ted says we need a guard or a defensive tackle now. I agree. Smooth Hoop says, I think 2/5 can get you a late fourth. I think it can for sure. Margaret says Taylor did not play well in most of the games that year. Yep. That's for sure. Maybe they trade up for grab-ass McIntyre. Oh, man. You know, the question would be, can the Saints find a way now? Because you mentioned Smoke Monday, and then we obviously got Kool-Aid into the picture here. Can the Saints find a way to get a player with a cooler name than either one of those two? And I'd imagine the answer is no, but we shall see. Catch and Cash says, do you think Penning would be better at left guard and Fuaga at left tackle? Personally, I think that it is, for me, I think it's Fuaga at right tackle. That's just my opinion. I think Fuaga's the right tackle. I think obviously right guard's Reese, center's obviously McCoy. It's the left side of the line that you got question marks about. Do you bring back Pete? If so, does he play left tackle, left guard? Do you kind of force this to be Trevor Penning's left tackle make or break year? That is possible. So the Saints, and again, this is not a guarantee. This is just me speculating. I think that Fuaga's got to be the right tackle. I think that's what you go into. Left guard's going to be interesting, though, because you signed Udo. Do you make him the left guard? A lot of question marks here. And again, this is me under the assumption that Ryan Ramczyk doesn't play again. That's just, again, he could play again, but that's the assumption I'm under. I just don't think that he's going to play again. And when there was reports about him slimming down, that kind of felt like the nail in the coffin, in my opinion. Kai the Great says, what are the best defensive tackle and pass rushers the Saints should target in the later rounds? So let me just check right now, because obviously I don't have the draft on at the moment. I have the live updates, but I want to make sure I'm still looking around. to see who's available. I'll give you the one that I love. So he's still available right now. Hopefully that doesn't change. And the Saints do like him. I can confirm. So if they take him, I think that'd be a good pick. Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa. That's someone the Saints had a visit with. He met with them. He's pretty high on their radar. It doesn't mean they're going to draft him. But Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa, if you're looking at a defensive tackle, that's probably the guy that I would look at. As for pass rusher, I mean, right now at this point, I think you're kind of guessing. But I could see Gabriel Murphy kind of fitting the bill for what they like from UCLA. But I would say right now, Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa, if they could pick a defensive tackle, that's kind of who I'd like them to go with. And he's still available. Hopefully he stays that way. And that's what I would look at. You know, that's what I see. What do we got here? Fuaga's right tackle, period. That should tell you something. Yep. And I agree. And it kind of tells you that Ramchek's out of here. That's at least the way I see it. And it seems like you would agree with that. Wide receiver isn't much of a need. We drafted a young talent last year who showed promise and made a few depth signings. It's not that. I think for me, wide receiver right now is predicated on a lot of focusing on, okay, if this guy takes that next step, if that guy does this, if he sustains that, Olave's a guarantee, it feels like. I think Shaheed's a good receiver. Is he a number 2? He is definitely at least a number 3. Is he a number 2? We're going to find out. Was A.T. Perry's late season surge a sign of things to come? A fluke? Who he is? We'll see. I think it could be who he is. I think A.T. Perry was a dog at Wake Forest. So I think the Saints have the talent there. You added Cedric Wilson, and you can go add another receiver. You can go add one in free agency. There's still a lot of vets just sitting out there. But it's still a little bit of a, this has to pan out, this has to pan out. So there's still question marks, and that's why I think wide receiver, you can always add another. But again, I'm not mad about it. Who takes Pratt and what round? Pratt for me, and I could be wrong, guys, it just feels like last year in the 4th round, there was a run on quarterbacks. You know, Haener getting taken, Stetson Bennett. I don't know who the team would be. Maybe Vegas. Maybe the Giants. I think who else needs quarterbacks that could make sense. Maybe the Jets, if you want to bring another young quarterback in there and let them watch Rodgers for a year or two. I would probably look at those teams, you know, for now. If Kubiak felt wide receiver was a big need, they would have gotten aggressive in free agency in this draft. It's possible. It's possible. I just thought he would want his yards after the catch guy. That's just the way I see it. Smooth Hoop says, hopefully we can snag a sleeper tight end. We have no red zone threats. Yeah, maybe Theo Johnson from Penn State. That again, he kind of seems like a project in my opinion, but he would be that red zone threat. Hurricane Mike says, I heard AD has bad attitude. It is a rumor. It might be validated with the way he fell a little bit. Trade whatever we can to move up and get Mohamed Kamara. I could be wrong, but I feel like there should be a rule where you only get one. You only get one Kamara. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it shouldn't be a rule. But again, yeah, Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. I forgot who it was. It's slipping the top of my mind right now. But the Saints had a lot of interest, I believe, in Marshon Lattimore. So they kind of like those smaller school guys. Maybe he fits that description. It's possible. Logan says, I don't see DA letting Lattimore go this year because this is the year that's make or break for DA. Giving your best player away when your job is on the line doesn't make any sense. I totally get that from that point of view. But what would make even less sense for the Saints is for them to draft a cornerback at 41, trade up for this guy, and they don't have any place for him to play. That would make less sense to me. And I think the Saints can no longer operate over what's best for DA because they got DA the quarterback he wanted. They spent for new defensive tackles that he asked for. They got him a different coordinator. How many more things does DA need for us to just realize he's not a good coach? Now, I understand your point, and your comment is right, Logan. It's counterintuitive for them to trade Lattimore when the goal is to win this year. I totally understand that, and I agree with you. But I think the Saints now have to kind of operate under the assumption that they got to do what's best for the franchise while also trying to be competitive. And I think there's a balance here because Kool-Aid could play and he could be good this year, but you also can't sit him, in my opinion. So, like, you can get the benefit of playing him. You would have to lose someone, and that would be the downside. But you cannot afford to just sit him this year. I think that would make no sense, in my opinion. The second-round pick should have been an interior offensive lineman, left side. Possible. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think this O-line still needs work, but there's a reason they made that move. We'll find out if it was right or wrong, but there's a reason they made that move. West Bank Rick says, we're going to wait for June 1st to see if we keep Lattimore. I feel we won't trade him. They might not, but again, financially, that is the move that makes the most sense for them. I think that again, financials make sense. I think adding more 2025 draft capital makes sense for them. And again, I'm not saying for you guys to just punt this season. I know, and I definitely can say, and I saw the comment from Catch and Cash, are we punting on the season? Kind of feel like it with you saying new coach going into next draft. I'm not saying they're punting on the season already, so I apologize if it comes off that way. I just think the way the Saints have operated this year is the Saints are operating like a team that says, try to make it work with what you have, but we're no longer exhausting all our assets to be win now, which is the right move because this is not a championship team at the moment. I think they can still contend in the NFC South because the NFC South is bad and the Saints have enough win now players, but the Saints went all in last year. They got the quarterback that they asked for. They got Brian Brzee with the first round pick. Like, they made win now moves, right? Kamara came back. They got MT. So they made these moves and it didn't equal anything, So I think you're trying to find that balance now. So Kool-Aid in their mind might be cornerback for the next 5 to 7 years, which is great. It might not be great for Dennis Allen, but they got to do what's great for the team. That's just the way I'm looking at it. Smooth Hoop says, A.T. Perry was a beast in college. I'd be surprised if he was a bad wide receiver 3. I would also be surprised. And I thought A.T. Perry had a lot of confidence down the stretch and, more importantly, gained Derek Carr's trust. So I would be surprised. I agree with you, but I would not mind them adding another wide receiver. Hel Mendoza says, I hope we can keep Marshon. It's one of our better strengths right now. It is. The cornerback room is the strength of this team. There is no doubt about it. That is the strength of the team. Who is our left guard? Slash Saldiveri, maybe? Yeah, it's possible. I mean, that would be a good thing. I think, and I mentioned this yesterday, I believe, the best scenario for the Saints would be Fuaga's immediate hit, and they get something out of Saldiveri and or Penning. If they get something out of the two of them and Fuaga hits, we're going to look at this team different because then you have 3 young linemen. You also got McCoy, who's in his about to enter his prime, and Ruiz. So we would look at them different. That seems like a pipe dream, but it's worth kind of, mentioning that would be the ideal scenario for them. Ted says Dennis Allen's looking for a backbone in free agency. Possible. Smooth Hoop says Saints are contending with Carr. Aren't contending with Carr. We are building towards the future, which is smart. I agree. And that's what you got to do now. And it stinks that you got to waste a $150 million contract. You could have used those assets elsewhere to realize it wasn't going to work. But this team is not built to win a Super Bowl, obviously. And you're trying to be competitive while also doing what's best for the team along the way and the future of the team. Because I think there's a delicate balance. I don't think it's as easy as blowing everything up and being terrible. But you got to find the balance. El Mendoza says Dennis Allen's finna become a bartender at a Hooters if he fails this season. Who the hell is going to Hooters if Dennis Allen's serving? Catch and Cash says, I hate Carmichael. Thank God he's gone. And I also hate DA. You're not alone on those. Calvin says, nothing he do this year would have made them Super Bowl caliber with this old roster. 1,000% agree. Logan says, I like your take on the Saints putting their needs above DA. That gives me hope because the last 2 years made me feel like they were support DA at all costs, which they were. Every move they made was for DA, as they should. I think when you get a coach, go after it. But not anymore. Not anymore. The sample size is there. You gotta do what's best for the team. So this is an interesting one that you guys put in. Let me get to it. And again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. But El Mendoza asked, most importantly, do we draft a punter? All I'm saying, and crazy enough, Mike Trippett literally just tweeted this, so I guess we're weirdly on the same wavelength at the moment. Iowa punter Torrey Taylor is a type of guy where you don't draft a punter because you get made fun of, but the Saints got a lot of 5th-round picks. And the Saints have no punter. Lou Hedley was not it. All Iowa football does is punt the football because their offense is literally from the Stone Age. So I would say, it might sound crazy, and I've had it on my notes for the last 3 days, guys. On my draft needs, above a lot of positions, I've had punter. Now, I don't have it above interior line. I don't have it above receiver. I don't have it above defensive tackle. But after those 3, I got punter. And I know it sounds ridiculous. And I have it here. It's literally, I know you guys probably can't see it, but I have it on my phone. Punter's on my needs. So Sounds crazy, but I would take up under, but particularly Torrey Taylor if he's there later on. So yeah, it sounds crazy, but I would. West Bank Rick says, what is wrong with moving a cornerback to safety? We did it before. There's nothing wrong with it, but I think a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry, though, is not the one you move to safety. You can move other guys to safety. I don't think taking the guy who was a 3-year starter on the outside for Alabama and kicking him to safety makes that much sense. Again, I could be wrong. That's just the way I see it, but we shall see. I'd love to see us trade up and take a safety. I'm not too sold on Howden. You know, I understand that. I thought Howden had some good moments. Also had some moments where you saw he was just a rookie going through his pains, but he also didn't get enough opportunities, in my opinion, to kind of come to whatever the conclusion is. I thought that they needed a safety. I still think they need a safety. But safety might be a position that they do patchwork in free agency, because I want to remind you guys, after the draft, when the comp pick formula is all said and done, the Saints usually make some moves. I think a couple years back, they got themselves Jameis Winston. They also got Jarvis Landry after the draft. Like, they've made signings after the draft when the comp pick formula no longer matters. I'm also praying we don't need to find another running back next year. I need our RB room to step up. Yeah, two things you need. Excuse me. You need Kendra Miller to stay healthy. That's number one, because I think Kendra Miller runs at a different speed than the rest of their room. And you need Alvin to find a way to give you something, but more importantly, he needs running lanes. He didn't have many last year. But I think Kendra is the guy. That's what you need. I think Kendra is the guy that needs to really pop off. Catch and Cash says, on a serious note, do you think Kubiak has head coach potential? If we do let go of DA, who's your top options next year? Has to be offensive minded like the rest of the league is going forward. I think there's two guys that are going to come up. I think the first one obviously is going to be Ben Johnson from the Lions. That's going to be a popular one. And then the other popular one is going to be Bobby Slowick of the Houston Texans. So those are going to be one. And then Gerard Johnson also from the Houston Texans. So those are going to be three guys from the offensive-minded wheelhouse that I think are going to be interesting. You know, I think that there's definitely a chance that they could end up signing someone that we don't expect and I don't have on my radar at the moment, so I don't want to speculate too much. But those are going to be the top three names, in my opinion, that are going to be popular, especially because I think the Texans are going to be really good. And I also think that the Lions are going to be really good again. So those candidates will probably remain high up in terms of stock. As for Kubiak, by the way, I just realized I didn't mention it. Answer that question. I don't see him as head coach potential, but we'll see. We'll see how this year goes. I think this is a really big opportunity for him. Ted says Lattimore for top punter. LOL. Could you imagine? I would probably not go on Twitter that day. And I'm always on Twitter. I would probably get off Twitter for that day. Chances we draft Jordan Travis to compete for the backup, I would guess low. But you know what? Don't rule out anything. But I would guess low. That would be my guess. I don't know, man. I at least from what I've heard, they like Jake Haener as the backup. And again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean, you know, that they shouldn't go get someone else. I just think that they want Jake Haener to go out there and compete with what they got in the quarterback room right now, which isn't inspiring because he would compete against Nathan Peterman, who sucks, and Kellen Mond, who might be worse. So we moved up and drafted a cornerback in round 2. Please, you never know what these motherfuckers going to do. Yeah, that is true. I've given up knowing what the Saints do. So that's why going into day 2, it's very rare where I have conviction on stuff. I think the last 2 times I've had conviction was Isaiah Foskey and Pete Werner on day 2. Usually in day 2, and just a spoiler alert, you'll catch it next year when the draft comes around. This is how my tendencies go. I start tweeting about a lot of different positions and players that are available because I don't really have a good read on what the Saints are going to do on day 2. I predicted Fuaga, but that was an easy prediction. I think everyone was going between him and Olu. And last year I predicted Brzee, but that's because there was a lot of Brzee smoke leading up to it. So that's not really a good one. But day 2, usually have no idea where the Saints may lean. And they did it again. Like, I didn't expect Alontae Taylor 3 years ago now, 2 years ago, whatever it might be. Definitely didn't expect Kool-Aid McKinstry today, but there they go. Got another comment here. You need to go draft Isaac. How do you pronounce his last name? Is it Guarendo? I don't know. I feel bad if I butchered it. And have him run behind Fuaga. Yeah, I think I could be wrong. I think his athletic metrics were like off the charts good. Like almost a perfect score for the relative athletic score, which the Saints love. So I'm not against that. I'm not against that at all. Logan says, love all the DA hate months before the season starts. Shows how the entire fan base feels. You know, it's hilarious. And I am in no position to judge because I rip Dennis Allen all the time. But it is crazy. It just feels like the shift has been there. Like the excitement around the Saints is at an all-time low, which is kind of upsetting. Not going to lie, but I understand it. I totally understand it. And I'm in no position to talk because I spent September, October, November, December, January saying that I hate Dennis Allen. So I'm in no position to talk about that. So I agree with you. I have a feeling Dennis Allen was only given a 3-year contract, which is why they're just riding it out. I still find it weird his details were never announced. You cannot find out what his contract is. It's one of the many mysteries in this world. There's a lot of mysteries, right? You know, do aliens exist? Who shot JFK? What is Dennis Allen's contract? Those are the 3 biggest mysteries. And I think, particularly the Dennis Allen one, we're never going to find out. It's absurd. I can't tell you how many times I've searched it up, and I've looked long and hard to find where this contract is in the details. But you cannot find them. You really can't. But I do agree. It kind of feels that way, right? Just like ride it out 3 years, and that's all. Just glad we didn't trade up for a QB. Yeah, I mean, if the Saints traded up for a QB, I think people would have rioted. I think it depends who it was. I think there's a lot of Saints fans I know that liked Penix, so maybe they would have been fine with that. But if they traded up, let's say, and got Bo Nix, I think people would have been nuts. Catch and Cash says exactly no excitement or expectations going into the season because of the guys in charge. Sadly. Randy says, do you know what our current picks are by any chance? Yep. Yeah. So let me give you the picks here, Randy. The Saints right now currently own pick 150. That is in the 5th round. They own pick 170 in the 5th round. They own pick 175 in the 5th round. So 3 5th-round picks, 150, 170, 175. They also have pick 199 in the 6th round and pick 239 in the 7th round. So at the moment, 5 picks, 3 in the 5th, 1 in the 6th, 1 in the 7th. That's the current total. It could change though, you know? El Mendoza says, also, anyone else notice there's a lot of second-gen players coming out in the draft nowadays, making me feel old as hell? I mean, they're about half the 49ers got second gens here. We got another McCaffrey. We got Frank Gore's son. We got Jerry Rice's kid. It is nuts. We got the Michigan kid earlier today. His father was drafted, I believe, 2 decades to the day. So kind of nuts with the way this is going on. And I think Antonio Gates' his son was mentioned in some transfer rumors today. So quite the day for second-generation guys. Ted says Dennis Allen's contract is his Hunter Biden's laptop. In Hunter Biden's laptop. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea at this point. Another mystery. So if we ever find out the contract details, I'll be the first one to come on here and talk about it, but I can't. I don't hate DA. I just think he's over his head as a head coach. Great DC. I agree. I think he's an excellent defensive coordinator. God knows he fixed the Saints defense, which was crap for a while. But yeah, in over his head as a head coach. Calvin says Frank Gore's son's trash, though. I mean, I would expect if he gets drafted, it's late day 3. That would be my guess. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. By the way, so like I mentioned, guys, 5 picks left, excuse me. They're probably going to move around. And I've mentioned it before, and I'll probably be brief on this. Remaining needs, I still think the Saints can use another offensive lineman. I think they can use another pass catcher, either wide receiver or tight end. I think they can use a defensive tackle. And I'll say it again, I think they can use a punter. I know it's stupid, but those would be the 4 that I'm looking at remaining needs. As for Elmendo said, who do you think has a good draft? There's a couple. First off, health is the big thing here, but I love that the Chargers went out and got Joe Alt because I think offensive line play is important. Then you go out there and you get Ladd McConkey because they need receivers badly. So I like what they did there. I'm trying to think out. Let me pull out the rest of the draft real quick. I love position value wise. I think that the Cardinals have done a really good job. Really good job there for them. But obviously, you kind of have that advantage when you have multiple first-round picks. I think that's kind of a cheat code. The fact that Dallas Turner went to 17 in the Vikings was pretty nuts, in my opinion. That definitely helps them. I think Kansas City's interesting to go offensive tackle in the 2nd round, get Kingsley. I thought that was a pretty smart move. I don't know what to make of Xavier Worthy, though. He's 160 pounds. He's pretty much my weight, and he's going to play in the NFL. That's nuts to me. So I'm a little hesitant there. But I like what they've done. I think Washington's done a good job. Go get yourself Johnny Newton. Obviously, you got Jaden Daniels. You get Ben Sinnott. So that's been a pretty good draft. On paper, the Eagles have added 2 really intriguing DBs. Will it work? I don't know. But on paper, they added 2 intriguing DBs. So that, I think, is an interesting one. On paper, you got the Colts adding A.D. Mitchell and getting Latu. So that might not be bad. It's interesting. The teams that I would question, Cowboys I would question. They keep saying they're all in, but they keep doing moves that don't indicate that they're all in. So I really got no idea. Rams had a hell of a draft. Absolutely. That's actually a really good one to mention. And I want to give the Rams credit here, which I hate doing. But the Rams clearly were very big on Florida State's football team this year and decided we're just going to bring their whole defensive line over, which is good. Calvin says we ain't getting ready. We ain't getting early QB till Arch declares for the draft. Who knows, man? We haven't even seen Arch Manning really play yet. And he's not going to play this year because Quinn Ewers is obviously going to play unless he gets hurt. So we'll see. The DA hate is understandable, but I do believe if he's paired with the right OC, which we hope we have, he'll be fine as we get this train back on track. That's definitely the hope. I do agree with you. Will it work? Who the hell knows? But if there's like a sliver of optimism, that would probably be what you try to have. Calvin says Worthy needs that Dairy Queen diet, gain 25 pounds in a month. Sure as hell does. Sure as hell. So 165 pounds, he gets a ball over the middle of the field, he gets crushed, he's out for the season probably. Like that, to me, that is nuts. I just don't know how it's going to work. Guy is fast as hell, though. Fast as hell. Did the Falcons draft a QB in the second round? I joked about that, but that's a story for another day. I'll probably end it here, to be honest, because I still can't believe that happened. How the hell did the Falcons think that we were going to go 8th pick QB? By the way, also spend $180 million on a QB in free agency. It might work. It might not work. I tend to think it's not going to work. I hope it doesn't work. But that shit was crazy to me. For the life of me, I cannot understand what the hell that organization was thinking. One of the great mysteries. Why you would drop over $100 million on Kirk Cousins, which is fine to do, but then all of a sudden you go take Penix at 8th. And I don't think Penix is a project. I think there's a guy that's supposed to start right away, and clearly he's not. So very confusing. What do y'all think about Hill playing fullback in this new system? I would love to see it. Don't know if that's the plan, but I would love to see it. I think Taysom, the days of him getting snaps at QB, I think are over, but that's just the way I see it right now. Maybe that changes. I think you probably got to use him more as a flex. I don't think the Saints are going to be running QB power a lot. I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it. But we'll see. But that's a great question, and that's something we'll hopefully get some clarity on. And I think we will probably when training camp rolls around. We'll probably get a better idea. Well, we'll see what happens. So, guys, day 2 is nearing a close here for the draft as we're nearing the close here for our coverage here at Buku Media for day 2. Day 3 is going to be interesting. A lot of picks for the Saints, primarily in the 5th round. So we'll have coverage. We'll have recaps for every pick. We'll probably have a show later on. We'll see what happens. In terms of where I feel right now about the Saints, grading them out, I'll leave them because I have questions about what's next. I'm going to say B/B+, and a lot of it's because I love the Fuaga pick. But I think that you got a really, really talented defensive back in Kool-Aid McKinstry. I just want to know what's the move because you got to play him. You can't sit him. That's a 41st pick. You cannot sit the 41st pick. So that's my question mark. But I love the Fuaga pick, and I think player-wise, they got two really good players in the building. Just want to see them play and see the field. So we'll see what happens, guys. That's going to wrap it up for me here tonight. Thank you so much for leaving your comments, your questions. Make sure you guys subscribe, as always, and like the video. We greatly appreciate it. We'll be back on Saturday for more coverage here from Buku Media and the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.